On a freezing night, a man heard scratching at his door. When he opened it, a shivering German shepherd stood there, her tiny puppies clinging to her side. He let them in, thinking he'd simply save them from the storm. But what followed was more terrifying than he imagined. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Snow pelted the cabin windows like tiny fists, the wind howling through the trees with a force that rattled the old wooden walls. Inside, Daniel tossed another log onto the fire, the flames crackling warmly against the bitter cold outside. Nights like this reminded him why he lived far from town. Peace, solitude, the kind of silence he craved. But tonight felt different. The storm was fierce, relentless, as though nature itself was unsettled. Daniel leaned back in his chair, listening to the eerie whistle of the wind. Little did he know, this night's silence would soon be broken forever. Daniel was halfway through sipping his tea when a faint sound reached his ears, a scratching, barely audible over the roaring wind. He froze, tilting his head toward the door. At first, he dismissed it as the storm playing tricks, but then came a low whimper, followed by another desperate scrape. Curiosity tugged at him. Setting his cup aside, he pulled on his heavy coat and opened the door. A blast of icy air slammed into him, carrying with it a sight that made his breath hitch. There, huddled in the snow, stood a German shepherd, her fur thick with frost. At her feet, 3 tiny puppies trembled, their small bodies pressed against her for warmth. Their eyes glistened with fear, their cries muffled by the wind. The mother dog lifted her head, locking eyes with Daniel. They weren't just eyes, they were pleading, begging him to save them. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, snow whipping at his face, torn between disbelief and urgency. The shepherd's body shook violently, yet she stood tall, shielding her puppies from the storm with every ounce of strength she had left. Her breath came out in quick, frosty clouds, but her eyes never left his. "All right, come on," Daniel muttered, stepping aside and holding the door open. The dog hesitated, sniffing the threshold as if making sure it was safe. Then, nudging her pups one by one with her nose, she guided them inside. Daniel quickly shut the door behind them, shutting out the blizzard. Inside, the warmth of the fire wrapped around the little family. The puppies collapsed onto the rug, whimpering softly as steam rose from their wet fur. The mother paced, still on edge, glancing at Daniel, but not baring her teeth, only watching, guarding. Daniel grabbed towels and knelt down, gently drying each puppy. Their tiny paws curled against his hand, their bodies shivering less with each stroke. "Poor things," he whispered. When he looked up, the shepherd was staring at him intently, tail still and ears alert. It was as if she was thanking him, but also warning him. The storm outside raged, but inside the cabin the fire crackled, warming the air. Daniel wrapped the puppies in an old blanket, watching their tiny chests rise and fall as they finally dozed. Relief washed over him. At least for the moment, they were safe. But the mother dog didn't rest. She paced near the door, her ears flicking at every howl of the wind. Occasionally, she let out a low growl, her gaze fixed on the darkness beyond. The frosted window. Daniel frowned. "What is it, girl? You're safe now." Yet, deep down, he felt it too, an uneasiness that didn't belong to the storm. The shepherd finally settled near her pups, but kept her head up, eyes sharp and body tense. She wasn't just recovering from the cold. She was listening, waiting. And in that silence, Daniel realized she hadn't simply come seeking shelter. She might be running from something. That night, Daniel tried to sleep, but the weight of unease pressed against him like the storm outside. The puppies were curled in a basket by the fire, their tiny snores soft and innocent. The mother lay beside them, but her eyes never closed. She stared at the door, muscles taut, every sense alive. Sometime after midnight, Daniel stirred awake to the sound of a low growl. The shepherd was on her feet, hackles raised, teeth bared at the cabin door. Then came the sound, a faint crunching in the snow, deliberate footsteps masked by the wind. Daniel held his breath, listening. At first, he thought it was just the storm, but then something scraped against the wood of the cabin. Not the random scratch of branches, but slow, purposeful, intentional. He grabbed his flashlight and edged toward the door, every nerve alight. The shepherd blocked his path, growling louder, as if warning him to stay back. Cautiously, he peeked through the frosted window. His heart skipped. In the swirling snow, half-buried footprints trailed toward the forest, but they weren't fading in the storm. Someone, or something, had been right outside, watching. The next morning, Daniel stepped outside, the snow crunching under his boots. The storm had passed, but unease clung to the air like frost on glass. He followed the tracks he had glimpsed the night before, large, heavy footprints, circling the cabin before vanishing into the trees. Whoever made them hadn't been lost. They had been watching. Back inside, the shepherd paced anxiously, her ears flicking at every creak in the wood. She positioned herself between the puppies and the door, her eyes sharp, body coiled like a spring. Daniel fed her scraps of meat, but she barely touched them, her attention fixed on the windows. That night, the scratching returned. Louder this time. The cabin walls groaned as if something, or someone, dragged claws or metal against them. Daniel's pulse thundered. He grabbed his rifle from the rack, steadying his breath. The shepherd snarled, teeth flashing, pressing against the door as if daring the intruder to come inside. Daniel tightened his grip, sweat forming on his brow despite the cold. He had thought he was saving the dog and her pups. But the longer the night stretched, the clearer it became. Something had followed them, and it wasn't going to stop. The silence shattered with a thunderous bang on the cabin door. Daniel nearly dropped his rifle as the wood rattled on its hinges. The puppies yelped, huddling closer together, while the German shepherd launched forward, barking with a ferocity that shook the walls. Another bang. This time, the sound wasn't just force, it was intent. Someone was trying to break in. Daniel's breath came in quick bursts as he aimed the rifle, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Who's there?" he shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. Through the narrow crack of the frosted window, he caught sight of a shadowy figure moving outside. Tall, broad, pacing with purpose. The shepherd snarled louder, her body pressed against the door, refusing to let it give way. Daniel's heart pounded. The truth settled over him like ice. Whatever had followed them here was no accident. It wanted in. Daniel's hands trembled as he braced the rifle against his shoulder. The banging grew louder, splintering wood raining from the doorframe. Just when it seemed the barrier would give way, the shepherd lunged, planting herself directly in front of the entrance, teeth bared and eyes blazing with defiance. "Easy, girl," Daniel whispered, lowering himself beside her. But he felt it, too, the surge of adrenaline, the raw determination to protect what was inside. Man and dog, strangers only hours ago, now stood as one against whatever threat prowled outside. A shadow loomed against the frosted glass. The intruder rattled the handle violently, growling curses muffled by the storm. Daniel steadied his aim, while the shepherd's snarls filled the cabin like thunder. In that tense moment, Daniel realized something powerful. He hadn't just let the dog into his home. He had welcomed a fierce ally, and together, they weren't backing down. The banging stopped as suddenly as it began. For several long minutes, silence hung heavy in the cabin, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the shepherd's low growl. Daniel lowered his rifle slowly, his heart still racing. He peered through the window. Only swirling snow remained. The shepherd relaxed just enough to curl protectively around her puppies, eyes still flicking toward the door. Daniel sank into his chair, breathless, realizing the truth. By opening his door, he hadn't just saved them. Together, they had saved each other. That night, an unbreakable bond was forged in fire and fear.